The night is quiet, except for the soft crackle of fire. Shadows dance across the walls of the cave, where figures huddle close for warmth. The air smells of smoke, damp earth, and something ancient, a world before time as we know it. Imagine yourself there, thousands of years ago, under a canopy of stars, untouched by light or noise, where every sound could mean survival. Or danger. This is not the world of kings or cities, not yet. This is the world of the first humans, the cavemen, whose story is carved not in books, but in stone, bone, and firelight. Welcome to History for Sleep, where we drift through the forgotten corners of time, calmly, slowly, and gently. Tonight, we're going to explore what it was really like to be a caveman, the life before civilization, the breath before history, a time when every sunrise brought both hope and fear, and every night was a fight against the dark. As we journey through these ancient lives, you might begin to imagine the cold air brushing your skin, the rhythmic heartbeat of the hunt, or the stillness of the world before words. Close your eyes if you'd like, get comfortable, and let your mind wander back tens of thousands of years. Before we begin, take a moment to subscribe to History for Sleep. It helps us bring you more calm journeys through time. And if you'd like, comment below and tell us what era or civilization you'd like to dream about next. Maybe you listen to drift off after a long day, or maybe this is your favorite late-night escape. Let us know when and how you listen. We love hearing from you. Now, take a deep breath. The fire is flickering lower. The cave walls glow with the soft reflection of flame. Outside, a wolf howls in the distance, and the night stretches endlessly beyond. Let's step into that world together, into the life of a caveman. Before the first city, before writing, before even the thought of kings or gods, there was the earth, raw, untamed, and immense. The land stretched endlessly, dotted with forests so dense that sunlight barely kissed the ground. Vast plains rolled toward distant mountains, and ice sheets glimmered in the far north like frozen oceans. The wind was sharper, the seasons harsher, and survival was not a matter of comfort, but of instinct. To be a caveman was to live within the pulse of nature itself. There were no roads, no borders, no farms, only the endless rhythm of life and death. Mammoths roamed the plains, their silhouettes enormous against the horizon. Saber-toothed cats stalked the shadows. Herds of wild horses thundered through the valleys, their hooves striking the earth like drums. Every movement of the land had meaning, a trail in the mud, a broken branch, the cry of a bird. All were signs of where food or danger might lie. The air was colder, and the world was louder in its silence. Rivers crashed through deep ravines, rain fell in heavy sheets, and the sounds of animals echoed across great distances. There were no walls to hide behind, no lights to keep the dark away. Night came swiftly, wrapping the land in deep blackness, where the stars shone so bright they seemed almost close enough to touch. For the early humans, those lights above must have seemed alive, mysterious fires scattered across the heavens, forever watching. Life was short and uncertain. Many would not survive past 30 winters. Illness, wounds, and hunger claimed lives often, and yet, against all odds, humanity endured. Every sunrise was a victory, a fragile triumph over the relentless forces of nature. They learned which roots could be eaten, which caves offered safety, which paths led to water. It was a world of constant motion. Small groups, families bound by blood and necessity, moved with the seasons, following herds and gathering what they could. Their footprints traced the beginnings of human history, though they would never know it. Each fire they lit in the dark was a spark of defiance against the wilderness, a statement that said, "We are still here." And so they lived, beneath the great sky, in the hush of a world still forming, Every sound mattered. Every choice meant survival. It was a life both brutal and beautiful, and from it, the story of us began. The day for a caveman began not with the sun, but with the cold. Long before dawn, the temperature dropped sharply, and the first light crept slowly over the horizon. The small group stirred, a handful of men, women, and children pressed together for warmth. The fire had dimmed to embers. Someone would blow softly on the glowing coals, feeding them twigs until the small flame flickered to life once more. That tiny flame meant everything. Without it, there was no warmth, no cooked food, no protection. Each morning was a test. The group had to decide whether to stay or move. Food was rarely abundant, and once a hunting ground was exhausted, the tribe had to travel. The men would scout the surrounding area, eyes sharp for movement in the grass, while women and elders checked the stores of dried roots or meat, counting what was left. The children, curious and wide-eyed, learned by watching, the subtle language of survival passed down in glances, gestures, and habit. Hunger was constant. It was not the gnawing emptiness that modern people know after missing a meal. It was a daily companion, shaping thought and action alike. Every hour without food was a risk. They hunted small game when they could, rabbits, birds, sometimes fish, caught in woven traps or sharp spears. But the dream of the hunt was always the great animal, the deer, the bison, the mammoth. To bring one down meant days, even weeks, of nourishment. Yet such hunts were dangerous, often deadly. The landscape was both home and enemy. Thorny bushes tore skin. Sharp stones cut feet. Rain could turn a safe trail into a flood. Shelter was precious. A shallow cave, an overhang, or a circle of stones for fire. At night, the wilderness came alive. Eyes gleamed in the darkness beyond the firelight. Wolves, hyenas, and big cats hunted too, and sometimes humans were their prey. Even in hardship, there were small comforts. The warmth of another's hand, the laughter of children as they played with sticks, the sound of rain drumming softly on the earth. These moments were rare but precious, a reminder that even in a harsh world, humanity found tenderness. Each day was unpredictable. A single misstep could end a life, yet the will to survive burned stronger than fear. Every breath was earned, every meal fought for. And through it all, something remarkable began to form. A quiet awareness that they were not just surviving, but asterisk living. Asterisk. To understand the caveman's world, you must first understand his hands. Rough, scarred, and strong, they were the instruments of survival. With nothing but instinct and patience, those hands shaped the first tools, small pieces of the earth reborn with purpose. The earliest tools were simple. A sharp edge chipped from flint, a rock used to crush seeds, a bone shaped into a point. But over time, the process grew more refined. Cavemen discovered how to strike one stone against another to create a flake sharp enough to slice through hide or meat. They learned that certain stones, flint, obsidian, quartz, fractured in predictable ways, allowing them to craft knives, scrapers, and spearheads. Each tool carried the story of its maker. The rhythm of creation was hypnotic. Strike, chip, test the edge. The sound of stone meeting stone echoed across the valleys, a language of survival carved into the silence. Once made, these tools were treasures, passed from hand to hand, often kept close even in sleep. A good blade could mean the difference between life and death. Bone and antler became just as valuable. From the remains of hunted animals, they fashioned needles, fish hooks, and harpoons. Sinew from muscle was used as string. Hide became cord or wrapping. Nothing was wasted. Every part of the animal, every shard of rock, had a purpose. As tools improved, so did life. Hunting grew more efficient, shelter more secure. Tasks that once took hours became faster, safer. A scraped hide could become clothing. a sharp spear could defend against predators. These small innovations were the first steps toward technology, the beginning of the long human tradition of shaping the world to our needs. At night, around the fire, these tools lay beside their owners like loyal companions. In the flickering light, the sharp edges caught glimmers of flame, shining like tiny stars fallen to earth. And perhaps in that moment, a thought stirred, that with their hands they could create, not just survive. It was the dawn of invention, and from those sparks of stone and bone, the future began to take shape. Fire was more than warmth. It was magic. To a caveman, fire was the first real power humankind ever controlled, and it changed everything. Before its discovery, the world belonged to the dark and the cold. Nights were long and dangerous, ruled by the glowing eyes of predators and the whisper of unseen movements. But when humans learned how to summon flame, even the wild seemed to hesitate. The night no longer belonged solely to the beasts. At first, fire was a gift from nature, lightning striking dry grass or a tree burning after a storm. Cavemen would approach carefully, taking embers or burning branches back to their shelters, guarding them with desperate care. If the fire went out, it could mean death. Over time, though, humans learned to make fire themselves, by striking flint against pyrite to produce sparks, or by twisting dry sticks together until smoke curled and flames appeared. The first moment that spark caught and became flame must have felt like summoning the sun from darkness. Around the fire, life took on new meaning. It was where food was cooked, turning raw meat into nourishment and safety. The smoke kept insects away, and the heat warded off illness and cold. Fire made the cave feel alive. Its flickering light painted the walls, bringing the ancient drawings and carvings to life in dancing motion. It was warmth, light, and protection, all bound into one living thing that humans could create, nurture, and control. But more than anything, fire became a gathering place. It was where stories were born. As flames flickered and cast their long shadows, people spoke, with gestures, with sounds, with the beginnings of words. They shared tales of the hunt, of spirits in the night, of the strange and the beautiful things they had seen. The fire's glow gave them courage to imagine, to wonder, to dream. In that orange light, humanity found its soul. Fire also changed the rhythm of time. Before it, darkness marked the end of the day. After it, the night stretched on, a place for reflection, creation, and connection. Parents taught children how to tend the flame, feeding it with just the right amount of wood, keeping it alive through the coldest nights. Fire became something sacred, a symbol of life that could never be allowed to die. Outside, wolves prowled at the edge of the light, their eyes catching the glow, but never daring to come closer. The cave was safe, warm, and alive with sound. The crackle of wood, the whisper of wind at the entrance, the quiet breathing of the tribe. Within the circle of firelight, humanity began to dream. It was the moment that Caveman stopped being just another creature of the earth and began to shape the world around him. Fire wasn't just survival. It was the first step toward civilization itself. In the vast, untamed world of the caveman, no one survived alone. The wilderness was too harsh, too unpredictable. To live, people needed one another, to share warmth, food, and protection. From this need came the first families, the first tribes, and the first sense of belonging that would one day grow into communities and nations. The tribe was everything. It was safety, identity, and memory. Within its small circle, perhaps a dozen or two people at most, everyone had a role. The strong hunted, the skilled crafted tools, the wise remembered the paths of animals and the seasons of plants. The very old, their bodies too fragile for hunting or gathering, became living libraries, the keepers of stories, of warnings, of memories carved in words rather than stone. The very young were the promise of tomorrow, watched closely by all, for the survival of the tribe depended on them. There were no written rules, no laws, no leaders in the way we imagine them now. Instead, life revolved around shared understanding, a quiet balance maintained through instinct and cooperation. The bonds between people were formed not by titles, but by the simple acts of giving and receiving, food shared after a successful hunt, a hand offered in the cold, a watchful eye kept through the night. Each gesture of care became part of the tribe's rhythm. Families were often fluid. Mates chose each other not through ceremony, but through trust and connection. Companionship, affection, and loyalty grew from the shared struggles of daily life. A child might be raised not only by its parents, but by the entire group, nurtured by many hands, protected by many eyes. In this way, humanity learned compassion early, not from comfort, but from necessity. Love was not a luxury. It was a survival skill. The fire was the center of the tribe's world. Around it, they ate, mended clothing, sharpened tools, and rested. The glow of the flames illuminated faces filled with the first reflections of community. Soft laughter might rise from the group as children played with stones or bones, their small voices echoing against the cave walls. There was peace in these moments, a fragile kind that came only after the dangers of the day had passed. Conflicts did happen, over food, shelter, or mates, but they were resolved quickly. Survival left little room for grudges. A fight could mean the tribe weakened, and weakness could mean death. So they learned to move on, to forgive, to find balance. Every person was needed. Every pair of hands mattered. The tribe was not just a group of people. It was a living organism, held together by instinct, care, and shared struggle. When someone fell ill, others gathered close, tending as best they could with herbs and warmth. When a child was born, quiet joy spread through the group, a spark of hope, a promise that life would continue. And when someone died, the loss was felt deeply. The tribe would sit in silence, sometimes leaving offerings of flowers, bones or stones, as if to honor the spirit of the one who was gone. Though they had no words for it, this was the beginning of grief and of remembrance. To be part of a tribe was to be part of something larger than oneself, a circle that offered both safety and meaning. Every breath, every task, every kindness strengthened the whole. The caveman's tribe was the first human family, bound not by civilization, but by the raw and enduring truth that together we survive, and alone we fade into the dark. Long before language filled the air with stories and songs, there were gestures, sounds, and glances. The caveman's world was not silent. It was alive with the hum of life and the murmur of meaning. Communication began not with words, but with movement. A raised hand could mean stop. A tilt of the head could signal danger. A soft sound in the throat could comfort a frightened child. Every expression, every movement of muscle carried a message. In those early days, survival demanded understanding. A hunt could fail if one person moved too soon or too late. A warning cry could save lives. So over time, humans developed a shared system of signals, not formal, not spoken, but deeply felt. The body became the first language. Faces told stories of fear, hunger, or hope long before any word existed to describe them. Imagine the quiet before a hunt. The group crouches low in the grass, eyes locked on their prey. One man gestures with 2 fingers toward the left. Another nods, understanding instantly. No one speaks, yet every heart beats in unison, every movement follows the same rhythm. That silent connection, that awareness of one another, was the foundation of all future communication. Sound soon joined gestures. Low grunts, whistles, clicks, and hums carried meaning. These were not words, but beginnings of them, the earliest attempts to shape sound into something more than noise. A sharp cry might mean danger. A drawn-out hum might call someone closer. The sounds were instinctive, born of emotion and need, yet they grew more sophisticated as humans began to think beyond the moment. Over countless generations, these sounds evolved. The human mouth, tongue, and throat adapted to produce a wider range of tones. The brain, too, began to change, forming patterns that could link specific sounds with specific meanings. The spark of language had been lit, but before words ruled the mind, emotion ruled the voice. The tone mattered as much as the sound itself. A growl could warn. A soft murmur could soothe. Communication was not yet about logic. It was about feeling. Even art became a form of language. On cave walls, symbols began to appear: handprints, animals, shapes. Each carried meaning, though not one we can fully understand now. Perhaps a drawing of a bison marked a successful hunt, or served as a plea for one yet to come. Perhaps the painted hands were not decoration, but proof of presence, a way of saying, I was here. I lived. These marks on stone were the first written echoes of the human voice. Firelight flickered over those walls as the tribe gathered, gesturing, grunting, and humming softly. They were not just surviving. They were beginning to connect in ways that reached beyond the moment. The first bonds of empathy were forming, built on the shared understanding that others could feel joy, fear, and pain just as they did. That realization that other minds existed was one of humanity's greatest awakenings. So when you imagine the caveman, don't see silence. Hear the rhythm of their world, the soft thump of footsteps, the murmurs by the fire, the call of the hunt. It was a language without words, yet rich with meaning. Through movement, sound, and expression, the cavemen spoke the first true human language, the language of life itself. The hunt was not merely an act of survival. It was the pulse of life itself. For the caveman, every hunt carried risk, and every success meant the difference between starvation and strength. It demanded patience, courage, and a deep understanding of the world around them. To hunt was to dance with nature, to move with it, not against it. Before dawn, the hunters would wake in silence. The air was cold, the ground damp with dew. The fire from the night before had died down to faint embers, and mist clung low to the earth. They prepared in the half-light, checking their spears, sharpening stone blades, and painting their faces with ash or clay to hide their scent and blend into the land. There were no grand ceremonies, no spoken words, only quiet determination. A nod between hunters was enough. They knew what needed to be done. They moved as shadows through the landscape, barefoot or wrapped in animal hide. Every sound, every shift of the wind mattered. The crack of a branch beneath a foot could scatter the prey and ruin everything. So they listened. To the birds, to the rustle of grass, to the distant thunder of hooves. Nature spoke to them, and they had learned its language through generations of observation and patience. When prey was spotted, perhaps a herd of deer, or the great bison grazing in the valley, the hunters began their strategy. Some would circle downwind to avoid detection. Others would move quietly into position. Their tools were simple but deadly. Spears tipped with sharpened stone, bows made from flexible wood and sinew, and traps hidden in paths the animals were known to take. Each movement required cooperation, precision, and trust. The moment before the strike was tense and silent. Breath held, muscles tight, hearts pounding. Then came the signal, a short cry, a thrown spear, a rush of sound as the hunters surged forward. The air filled with motion, the roar of men, the panicked cries of animals, the thud of feet against earth. It was chaos, but it was beautiful, a display of human instinct in its rawest form. Sometimes the hunt succeeded. A spear found its mark, and the animal fell. The hunters would gather around it, offering low sounds of respect, not celebration, but gratitude. They understood the balance of the world, that life must end for life to continue. They would use every part of the kill, the meat for food, the hide for warmth, the bones for tools, the sinew for binding. Nothing was wasted. In taking a life, they ensured the survival of their tribe. But sometimes the hunt failed. The prey escaped, or worse, turned on its pursuers. A mammoth could crush a man with a single step. A boar could gore with its tusks. A lion could spring from nowhere. Wounds were common, and death was always close. When they returned empty-handed, the tribe went hungry. The weight of that failure was heavy, not only in the belly, but in the spirit. Hunger made tempers short, steps slower, and the cold nights longer. Yet, no matter the outcome, the hunters always went back. It was not just instinct, it was duty. The tribe depended on them, and the rhythm of life depended on the hunt. Each attempt taught them something: the way animals moved, the signs of the changing seasons, the subtle cues of wind and scent. Over time, they became masters of observation, reading the landscape like a map, long before maps ever existed. At night, by the fire, stories of the hunt were shared, not in full sentences, but through gestures and sounds, the sweep of an arm to mimic a running deer, a growl to recall a predator's challenge, laughter when the danger had passed. Children watched, wide-eyed, learning through play what they would one day live for real. The stories of the hunt were the first lessons, the first legends. The hunt was life and death, fear and triumph. It was the heartbeat of early humanity, the proof of our resilience and the spark of our creativity. Each chase through the tall grass, each spear thrown against impossible odds, was a step toward who we would become. In every successful hunt, in every shared meal, humanity found not only survival, but purpose. While the hunt brought meat and danger, the gathering brought life and balance. It was the quiet work of the tribe, the patient, steady rhythm that sustained them when hunts failed or seasons changed. For every spear thrown, there were hands reaching into the earth, fingers brushing through leaves, eyes scanning the ground for what could be eaten, used, or healed. The gatherers were the heartbeat that kept the tribe alive long after the fires of the hunt faded. At dawn, when the mist still hung over the grass, the gatherers set out. Often they were women, elders, and children, though everyone learned the craft. They carried woven baskets made of reeds or hides, and they moved through the land with intimate knowledge born of generations. They knew which roots were safe, which berries turned the tongue purple with poison, and which mushrooms brought sickness instead of strength. Their knowledge was vast, and though they had no books, it was written in memory, passed in whispers and demonstrations. They followed the paths of the seasons. In spring, they found tender shoots pushing through the thawed earth. In summer, the berries ripened red, black, blue, and the forests offered nuts and honey. Autumn brought roots and seeds, which they dug, dried, and stored for the cold months. Winter was lean, but even then they searched. Bark, moss, and frozen herbs could still sustain the desperate. Nature provided, but only to those who understood her language. The act of gathering was a kind of meditation. Hours were spent in silence, walking the same trails, crouching low to examine plants, touching the soil with reverence. The gatherers learned to read the world through color and scent, the deep green of edible leaves, the sweet smell of ripe fruit, the sharp tang of sap that healed wounds. Their minds held maps of the land, not drawn in ink, but in memory. Each tree, each stream, each hill had meaning. Children learned by watching. They followed close, listening as the older women murmured soft lessons. Not that one, or dig deeper here. A child might carry a small basket, proudly adding their handful of berries or nuts. In this way, knowledge became inheritance. The gatherer's wisdom was as vital as the hunter's strength, for food alone did not guarantee survival. Understanding did. The gathering was not just about eating. Many plants had hidden powers. Some soothed pain, Some healed cuts, others brought sleep or eased fever. The gatherers became the first healers, experimenting, observing, remembering which plants brought comfort and which brought harm. They were the keepers of health and the guardians of subtle knowledge, a sacred role that bound them to the rhythm of the earth itself. When the baskets were full, the gatherers returned to camp, their arms heavy and their hearts light. Children would rush to meet them, eyes bright at the sight of fresh fruit or sweet roots. The tribe shared what was brought back, roasting roots over the fire, crushing herbs into paste, weaving leaves together for storage. The smell of earth and smoke mingled, filling the air with the scent of survival. Unlike the hunt, the gathering had no blood, no violence. It was slower, gentler, a reminder that survival was not always won through strength, but through harmony. It taught patience, observation, and respect for the balance of nature. For every plant taken, another was left. For every patch of berries picked, some were spared for the next season. The gatherers knew instinctively that life must renew itself, or all would perish. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they sat together by the fire, sorting their finds. The flickering light played over their faces, tired but peaceful. The day had been long, but the tribe would eat, and that was enough. Tomorrow they would rise again and walk the familiar paths, quiet, steady, eternal. In the rhythm of gathering, humanity learned something profound, that survival was not a war against nature, but a partnership with it. Every leaf plucked, every seed stored, every shared meal whispered the same truth, that the earth provided so long as it was respected. And from that respect grew the first seeds of wisdom. The caveman's world was a vast wilderness, breathtaking but merciless. Every gust of wind carried cold, every shadow might conceal a predator, and every storm could mean death if one was unprepared. Shelter was not just a place to sleep. It was life itself, a fragile barrier between the tribe and the chaos of nature. Finding it, building it, and protecting it became one of humankind's earliest and most essential instincts. Caves were the first great shelters, gifts of the earth carved by time and water. Some were deep and dark, stretching far into the rock like tunnels into the unknown. Others were shallow hollows, wide enough for a small family and their fire. The walls offered safety from the wind, and their stone embrace held warmth through the night. The flicker of firelight against rough rock made them feel alive, a womb of safety amid the wild. But not every cave was kind. Some were already home to bears or hyenas, and entering the wrong one could mean death. Every shelter had to be claimed. When no caves were near, the tribe made their own. They built lean-tos from branches and hides, or dug pits in the earth, lined with grass and moss. Sometimes they constructed domes of wood and animal skin, weighted down with stones to keep out the rain. These shelters were simple but clever, light enough to take apart, strong enough to endure the night. Over time, they learned where the wind blew strongest, where floods came, and how to use the natural curve of the land for protection. The materials of shelter came from the world around them. Trees offered wood, bones from great beasts became frames, and hides provided warmth. They learned to lash branches together with sinew or vine, to stack stones in rings, to weave reeds into walls that swayed with the wind instead of breaking beneath it. Each shelter told the story of its builders, their resourcefulness, their patience, their quiet understanding of the land. Fire turned a shelter into a home. Its glow filled the space with comfort. Its smoke curled up to the ceiling, painting it black over time. Around it, the tribe gathered to eat, to rest, and to dream. The sound of rain drumming on hides or stone became a lullaby, a soft reminder that they had endured another day. Children drifted to sleep beside their parents, safe in the knowledge that the world, for now, was held at bay. Shelters were often temporary. The tribe moved with the seasons, following herds and ripening plants. When they left, their homes remained, bones of wood and stone left behind to weather back into the earth. Yet, in a way, each shelter they built was a whisper of permanence, an early hint of humanity's longing to stay, to belong, to shape a place that was truly theirs. Sometimes they returned to the same caves year after year. Over generations, the walls would fill with soot and smoke, with drawings and carvings, the first memories of a place. Bones of old fires would mix with new ones, and the floors would hold the prints of countless feet. These caves were not just shelters anymore. They were the first homes, sacred, familiar, and filled with echoes of laughter, birth, and death. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, carrying the scent of rain and the cries of distant animals. But inside, the firelight flickered, and warmth spread through the small space. The tribe was together, safe for the night. The world beyond the cave could wait. Shelter taught humanity its first lesson in creation, that survival could be built, shaped, and crafted by human hands. It was the beginning of the idea of home asterisk, a word not yet spoken, but already deeply felt. In those dark caves and fragile huts, humankind learned that safety could be made, not just found, and from that knowledge, civilization would one day rise. The world of the caveman was never still. It shifted beneath their feet, breathed around them, and transformed with a force they could neither predict nor control. Seasons came and went, each with its own trials, but beyond those cycles were greater changes, slow, relentless transformations that reshaped the land and tested humanity's ability to adapt. To live in this age was to exist in a world in constant motion, a world that demanded flexibility and resilience above all else. There were times when the earth grew colder. Ice crept down from the north, spreading slowly over valleys and rivers. Forests turned to tundra, and animals that once roamed freely began to vanish. Mammoths, woolly and vast, migrated in search of grasslands that no longer grew. Reindeer, musk oxen, and wolves followed the cold, thriving where humans struggled. For the caveman, survival meant following too. Tribes moved great distances, sometimes over generations, chasing warmth and food across unfamiliar lands. And then there were times when the ice retreated. The earth warmed, glaciers melted, and new rivers carved their way through rock and soil. Forests returned, rich with life, deer, boar, and birds filling the air with movement and sound. The abundance was a blessing, but it brought new dangers. Floods swelled, insects spread, and predators returned to hunt among the trees. Change, whether ice or thaw, was never easy. It was the one constant that shaped every generation. For the caveman, these transformations were both terrifying and awe-inspiring. The land itself seemed alive, capable of anger, hunger, or mercy. A river could shift its course overnight, swallowing a familiar camp. A mountain could crumble, or a storm could strip the land bare. Thunder echoed like the voice of a god. Fire from the sky could ignite whole forests. They did not yet understand nature as we do, but they respected it deeply, knowing it could give and take in equal measure. Adaptation became humanity's greatest tool. They learned new hunting patterns when animals migrated. They found new foods when old ones disappeared. They discovered how to use different materials as their environments changed: stone in the mountains, bone on the tundra, wood in the forests. Every challenge carved resilience into their bones. The instinct to adjust, to learn, to endure became part of who they were. Migration itself became a way of life. Tribes crossed rivers, plains, and mountains, leaving behind trails that one day would form the roots of entire civilizations. Along the way, they encountered others, strangers who looked like them, but not quite. Sometimes there was trade and cooperation. Other times there was conflict. Yet even in those encounters, humanity was evolving. Each meeting, each blending of bloodlines and ideas, shaped the species into something stronger, more adaptable, more aware. The stars above remained their only constant. When the world changed below, the night sky remained steady, a map of light and mystery. Perhaps they looked to it for comfort, tracing patterns and stories, using it to guide their migrations. The cavemen may not have had names for the constellations, but they knew the sky as their oldest companion, watching silently as ice came and went. As centuries passed, the landscape shifted again and again. Lakes formed where glaciers melted. Deserts expanded where grasslands once grew. The creatures that had ruled the Ice Age began to fade, leaving behind bones buried in time. Humanity, small and fragile compared to the beasts it hunted, endured through every transformation. Fire, shelter, and community carried them forward, but adaptability was their truest strength. Change was their teacher. From it, they learned humility, patience, and innovation. The cavemen didn't fight the world. They flowed with it, bending like the grass in the wind. That ability to bend without breaking, to survive through transformation, became the foundation of everything that would come after. So when the cold winds blew and the ice stretched across the horizon, they gathered closer to the fire. And when the thaw came and flowers bloomed again, they stepped forward into the new world. The earth would always change, but so would they. In every shift of season and shadow, humanity learned not just to survive the changing world, but to belong to it. Survival, for the caveman, was more than a daily struggle. It was an art. It required more than strength. It demanded awareness, patience, and creativity. To live in a world ruled by the elements and beasts, far stronger than oneself, meant learning not only how to endure, but how to adapt with grace. Every day was a lesson, every mistake a teacher. Through trial, observation, and sheer will, early humans began to master the delicate balance between nature and survival. They learned the language of the land, not with words, but with senses sharpened by need. The rustle of leaves could signal danger. The movement of clouds foretold rain or storm. The scent of smoke on the wind warned of fire, while the tracks in mud whispered stories of the animals that had passed. Each sign mattered. To survive was to be aware, to listen to the world as if it were alive and speaking. Their bodies became tools of survival. Skin toughened by wind and cold, muscles strengthened by constant motion, and eyes trained to catch even the faintest movement in the distance. But their greatest tool was their mind. Unlike the predators that relied on tooth or claw, the caveman relied on thought. He planned, he remembered, he learned. The moment he began to imagine, to see beyond the present hunger or fear, humanity crossed an invisible threshold. The hunt became strategy. The night became opportunity. The world became something that could be understood. Fire and tools were the obvious weapons in this art, but survival went far beyond invention. It was about cooperation. A lone hunter could not take down a mammoth, but a tribe working together could. A single woman could not gather enough food for the winter, but many could store plenty. Humanity's strength lay not in isolation, but in connection, in shared effort, shared knowledge, and shared care. Each person's survival was bound to the others, and this understanding formed the earliest sense of society. They also began to prepare for the unseen. When food was abundant, they saved. When the sky darkened, they found higher ground. They studied the behavior of animals, how birds fled before storms, how herds shifted before the cold, and learned to follow those same instincts. This awareness of the future, this planning, was something no other creature possessed. It turned survival from chance into craft. Clothing became another quiet innovation. At first, they wore animal hides for warmth, crudely tied or wrapped. Over time, they learned to scrape, soften, and stitch hides together using bone needles and sinew thread. These garments became armor against the cold and wet, extending the reach of human life into places no bare skin could survive. They learned to tan hides over smoke, to color them with natural dyes, and to decorate them with beads or shells, proof that even in survival, beauty found its place. Weapons and traps grew more refined too. The simple sharpened stick evolved into the spear, balanced for throwing. The hand axe became an all-purpose tool for cutting, digging, and shaping. Traps woven from reeds or bent branches allowed them to catch small game without risk. Each invention was born of necessity, but crafted with ingenuity. The cavemen were not merely reacting to their environment, they were mastering it little by little. There was an art to rest as well, knowing when to move and when to stay, when to risk and when to wait. Some days it meant traveling through harsh weather to find new shelter. Other days it meant conserving strength and tending to the injured. The tribe understood that endurance was not just about speed or power, but about timing and wisdom. To rush was to perish. To wait was to endure. Even the way they ate showed adaptation. They learned which parts of the animal held the most nutrition, which plants could be combined for better taste or digestion. They roasted meat to make it safer, fermented fruits without knowing the science behind it, and boiled roots into stews that warmed the body and spirit alike. Each discovery, though small, added another layer to the growing art of survival. And through it all, there was a quiet pride. Each day survived was a victory. Each fire rekindled, each shelter built, each wound healed. These were triumphs carved into the very story of humankind. When the wind howled outside and predators prowled in the dark, the caveman sat by his fire, wrapped in hide, surrounded by his tribe, knowing that through skill, instinct, and endurance, they had earned another sunrise. Survival was no longer just about existing. It was creation. It was knowledge. It was humanity's first true art form, and every spark, every tool, every breath was a brushstroke on the long, unfolding canvas of human life. Before temples, before written prayers, there was the whisper of the wind in the trees, the flicker of firelight against stone, and the deep silence that came after death. In that silence, the caveman began to feel something larger than himself, something unseen, yet always present. Out of fear, wonder, and gratitude, the first beliefs were born. They were not shaped by words, but by feelings, an instinctive reverence for the world and the mysteries that surrounded it. Every hunt carried with it a sense of awe. To kill was necessary, but it was never taken lightly. The hunters knew that life was fragile, that in taking one, they preserved many. When a great beast fell, there was a moment of quiet. They might touch its fur, murmur sounds of thanks, or leave small offerings, a stone, a feather, a piece of food. Though they did not call it worship, these acts were the beginnings of ritual, gestures of respect to the spirits of the animals, to the earth, to life itself. To the caveman, the world was alive. The river had a voice, the trees had spirits, the mountains watched from afar. Fire itself seemed to breathe and move with intention, its light dancing like a living thing. Storms were the anger of the sky. The moon was a watchful guardian. Death was not an ending, but a transformation, the passing of energy from one form to another. They may not have understood the mechanics of life and death, but they sensed its balance, its unbroken circle. In the glow of the fire, stories began to take form, not tales of kings or gods, but of animals, ancestors, and spirits. A shadow cast on the cave wall might become the ghost of a great bison. A strange sound in the dark might be the whisper of a departed soul. These stories were shared softly at night, blending fear with comfort, mystery with meaning. They were not meant to explain everything, but to remind the tribe that they were part of something greater, a web of life stretching beyond what eyes could see. The cave walls became their sacred places. With pigments made from earth and ash, they painted scenes of hunts, herds, and symbols whose meanings are lost to us. The act of painting was itself a kind of prayer, a connection between the physical and the spiritual. Each stroke of color, each carved line, was a way to honor what they depended on. The animals on the walls were not decorations. They were invocations. To paint the bison was to call upon its spirit for strength. To mark a handprint was to leave a piece of the self for the world beyond to remember. Birth and death were also moments of quiet ceremony. When a child was born, the tribe gathered close, breathing in the miracle of new life. The mother was surrounded by warmth and care, for every infant represented hope, another chance for the tribe to endure. When someone died, the body was often laid carefully, curled like in sleep. Flowers, stones, or tools were placed beside them, offerings for the journey beyond. These were not yet religions as we know them, but they were the seeds of faith. Dreams held special power. In dreams, the caveman could meet the dead, speak to animals, or walk with the spirits. The line between reality and the unseen was thin, and dreams were considered messages, warnings, blessings, or visions. Around the fire, the tribe would listen as one spoke of what they had dreamed, weighing its meaning together. These dreams guided them, comforted them, and gave them a sense of connection to the forces they could not name. The belief in spirit was, in many ways, the birth of imagination. It gave shape to the unknown and softened the edges of fear. When thunder rolled across the sky, it was not just sound, it was the voice of something powerful. When the sun rose again after the long night, it was not only light, it was proof that life continued, that they were watched over, that they were part of a greater rhythm. Through belief, the cavemen found peace in uncertainty. They learned to see beauty in mystery, to give thanks for life, and to mourn with meaning. These early spiritual thoughts were not bound by temples or words, but by feeling, a pure instinctive faith that the world was alive, that they were not alone, and that something beyond the firelight cared for them, even in the darkest of nights. In a world ruled by danger and uncertainty, love might seem like a luxury, yet even in the harsh life of the caveman, it flourished quietly, naturally, and powerfully. It was not the love shaped by poetry or vows, but something more primal and enduring, the bond between those who shared the same fire, the same hunger, the same struggle to see another sunrise. Love was not spoken. It was felt, shown, and lived. It began, as it still does, with connection. Two people drawn together by comfort and trust, by the way their presence eased the cold. They would share food, warmth, and shelter. They would protect one another from the night. There were no ceremonies, no words of promise, but there was loyalty, born of survival and the simple joy of companionship. These were the earliest partnerships, rooted not in ritual, but in shared endurance. Within the tribe, affection was the glue that held everything together. Parents cradled their children close, shielding them from the cold and danger. They taught them the ways of the world, how to walk softly through the forest, how to read the signs of weather, how to recognize the call of an animal. Every small lesson was an act of care. A parent's love was fierce, protective, and tender. Losing a child meant losing part of oneself, and though they had no words for grief, they felt it deeply, sitting silently by the fire, staring into the glow that reminded them of life's fragility. Children were precious because they were the future. Each birth was celebrated in quiet joy, a sign that life continued. The whole tribe took part in their upbringing, mothers, fathers, elders, and even other children. A newborn's cries would draw smiles, and its laughter would bring hope. The sound of a baby's giggle in a dark cave was like music, proof that despite hunger, storms, and fear, there was still light in the human heart. Love was also seen in friendship, the bonds between hunters who had faced danger together, or gatherers who shared food, even when there was little to spare. These friendships were sacred in their own way. To trust someone enough to share the hunt, or to sleep beside them when predators prowled, was the highest form of faith. They depended on one another completely, and that dependence grew into something more than survival. It became kinship, a chosen family bound by shared experience rather than blood. Loss was an inevitable companion. Life was fragile, and death often came suddenly through hunger, sickness, or accident. The tribe mourned together. When one of their own died, they sat close around the body, quiet and solemn. Sometimes they left flowers or stones. Sometimes they simply watched the fire burn low, each lost in thought. There was no word for sorrow, yet its weight was felt in every bowed head, every gentle touch on the shoulder of the grieving. Death taught them to cherish the moments of peace and laughter, for they knew how quickly those moments could fade. In the long nights after tragedy, they found comfort in one another. A hand resting on another's arm, a quiet hum by the fire, small gestures that reminded them they were not alone. Love was their warmth when the fire burned low. It was the invisible thread connecting them across the cold stretches of their existence. It was the first form of meaning they ever created, the understanding that even in a world of survival, they could care for someone more than themselves. Over time, these emotions became part of their identity. Love gave purpose to survival. It made the danger worthwhile. The desire to protect, to nurture, to belong became the heart of humanity. Without it, they might have endured, but they would never have truly lived. When the wind howled outside and the fire crackled softly, the tribe would curl together, bodies close, hearts beating in quiet harmony. Parents would watch their children sleep, lovers would share warmth beneath hides, and friends would rest side by side, trusting one another completely. In that closeness, the world felt less cruel, less vast. Love was not just an emotion. It was the proof that even in the most primitive days, humanity had already discovered what it meant to be truly alive. In the world of the caveman, every person had a purpose, and none was more essential than the women who held the tribe together. Though they lived in an age before titles, ranks, or written history, women were the quiet architects of survival, gatherers, healers, mothers, and teachers whose work sustained the tribe as surely as the hunter's spears. Their strength was not measured in muscle or weapons, but in endurance, wisdom, and care. They were the heartbeat of early humanity. Each day, women rose with the dawn, tending to the small fires that had burned through the night. They fed the flames with dried twigs and bark, keeping the light alive before the chill of morning could creep in. Around them, children stirred, and the day began. Their tasks were many, their labor constant, preparing food, weaving hides, shaping clay, storing roots, tending wounds. There was no idle time in their lives, but there was deep purpose in every motion. Women were the primary gatherers, moving through forests and meadows with a practiced eye that saw what others missed. They knew the seasons of plants, which berries ripened in spring, which roots could be dug in fall, which leaves could cure fever or soothe pain. Their knowledge was vast, passed quietly from mother to daughter over generations. Without it, the tribe could not have survived the times between hunts. Their hands fed the tribe just as surely as any spear. They were also healers, guided by instinct and experience. When someone was injured in a hunt or fell ill, it was often a woman who tended to them. She knew which herbs stopped bleeding, which poultices drew out infection, and how to set a broken bone. These skills were not written or recorded, but remembered, a living library carried within each generation of women. Their care meant the difference between life and death, and their compassion bound the tribe in trust. Women also shaped the rhythms of family life. They gave birth in a world without comfort, enduring pain and danger with courage that few could imagine. The tribe would often gather close during childbirth, protecting the mother from harm, bringing water, warmth, and prayer like murmurs. When the child's cry first filled the cave, it was met with relief and quiet joy. Life, fragile and new, had entered the circle once more. The mother would hold the infant to her chest, feeling its heartbeat against hers, a moment older than civilization itself. Beyond nurturing, women taught. They passed on knowledge not through words, but through demonstration, showing children how to weave baskets, how to grind seeds into flour, how to tell by scent when rain was coming. Their lessons were patient and rhythmic, woven into the fabric of daily life. They taught not only survival, but awareness, a sensitivity to the patterns of the natural world that would one day grow into science, medicine, and agriculture. In many tribes, women also played a spiritual role. They were seen as life-bringers, connected to the earth's cycles of birth, growth, and renewal. Some may have been the keepers of ritual, the ones who remembered the songs, the gestures, and the offerings made to the spirits of animals or ancestors. Around the fire, they told stories, their voices soft but steady, keeping the tribe's memories alive. Through them, the tribe maintained its identity and continuity, generation after generation. Even in the face of hardship, women displayed quiet resilience. When partners were lost to hunts or migration, they carried on, protecting children, gathering food, and keeping the fire burning. They knew loss intimately, yet their endurance gave the tribe its greatest strength, stability. Their presence was the constant thread through every storm and season, a reminder that life persisted even when the world felt cruel. Though the world outside was harsh, within the circle of the tribe, women's influence was everywhere, in the warmth of the fire, the fullness of the food stores, the comfort of the sick, and the laughter of children. They were the guardians of continuity, balancing the chaos of nature with the calm of creation. Their role was not one of power as we define it today, but of balance, the unseen foundation upon which the tribe stood. For every hunt that brought food, there was a mother who raised the next hunter. For every fire that burned, there was a woman who kept it alive. Civilization began, in many ways, with their patience, their care, and their unyielding strength. In the story of humanity, their names are lost to time. But their work, their endurance, and their love echo in every generation that followed. They were not just companions in survival. They were the keepers of life itself. In the flickering light of the fire, where shadows danced and the smell of smoke and earth filled the air, children grew, the smallest members of the tribe, fragile yet endlessly curious. They were born into a world of danger, but also of wonder. Every sight, every sound, every sensation was new. For the caveman's children, life was a constant lesson, and the world itself was their classroom. They learned not through books or teachers, but through watching, touching, and surviving. From their first breath, a child's cry carried through the cave, soft and high, mingling with the crackle of fire and the murmurs of the tribe. Mothers held them close to their skin, wrapped in furs, their warmth keeping the cold at bay. Infancy was a time of constant care. Food came from the mother, comfort from her voice and touch. The bond between them was unbroken, an anchor in a harsh and shifting world. Around them, the tribe watched with quiet tenderness. Every birth was a renewal, a promise that the group would endure for another generation. As the child grew, they began to explore, crawling, then stumbling, then running through the cave or forest. Their laughter echoed against stone, their small hands clutching sticks or stones, mimicking the adults around them. Play was not just amusement, it was preparation. Through games of chase, pretend hunts, and imitation of gathering, they developed the instincts that would one day mean survival. The world was their teacher, and curiosity was their guide. The tribe's elders played a vital role in raising the young. Too old to hunt or gather, they became storytellers and teachers. They showed the children how to shape tools, how to recognize animal tracks, how to understand the sky and the changing seasons. Around the fire, they told tale-lies, not in words as we know them, but in gestures, sounds, and symbols. These stories carried wisdom, warnings about predators, lessons about courage, memories of great hunts. Through them, the children inherited not just knowledge, but identity. Danger was ever present. Children had to learn caution as soon as they could walk. A moment's distraction near a cliff, a river, or a fire could mean disaster. The wilderness was not forgiving. Yet within this danger, they learned resilience. Scraped knees and bruised hands were badges of learning. Each fall taught balance. Each mistake taught awareness. Childhood in this age was short. By the time they reached 10 or 12, they were expected to contribute, to hunt small game, to gather roots, to help tend the fire. Adulthood came early because survival did not wait. Still, there was joy. In the quiet moments between hunts and storms, laughter filled the air. Children played with bones, shells, or pebbles, crafting toys without realizing it. They drew with charcoal on cave walls, leaving handprints beside those of their elders, marks of belonging. Some of these handprints still survive today, tens of thousands of years later, pressed against stone as if to say, "I was here." It is one of the most haunting and beautiful messages ever left behind. The tribe protected its children fiercely. Every member shared responsibility for their safety. When a child was ill, the entire group worked to help, bringing herbs, warmth, or prayers whispered into the darkness. When a storm raged or predators prowled, adults formed a circle, keeping the young at the center. The instinct to protect the next generation was stronger than fear itself. It was that instinct that ensured humanity's survival through ages of peril. Children also brought something precious, lightness. Their laughter softened the heaviness of life. Their curiosity reminded the tribe that not all of existence was struggle. Watching a child chase butterflies in the grass or stare in wonder at falling snow brought hope to those who had seen too much death and hardship. They were the living proof that the human spirit was not just built to survive, but to find joy even in the harshest world. As they grew older, the children carried forward the traditions of their people. They learned where to find water in dry months, how to craft tools, how to honor the spirits of the hunt. Each generation added to the memory of the tribe, keeping it alive. Childhood, brief as it was where humanity's greatest gift began to take root, the ability to learn, to adapt, to imagine. In those small hands that reached out to touch the firelight or to trace drawings on stone walls, the future was being shaped. The children of the cave were not just inheritors of survival. They were the dreamers of what might come next. Long before cities or writing, they carried within them the spark of curiosity and wonder that would one day lead humanity beyond the cave, into the dawn of civilization. Life for the caveman flowed like the rhythm of the natural world, a cycle as old as the earth itself. Just as the seasons turn from spring to winter and back again, so too did human life move through its stages, each with its own beauty, burden, and purpose. To live in that ancient time was to be part of the great pattern of nature, woven into the fabric of existence itself. Every moment, from the first cry of birth to the last fading breath, had meaning, even in its simplicity. Childhood was the season of learning. It was brief, but bright, filled with wonder and discovery. Children were the sprouts of spring, tender and full of energy. They learned through play, through imitation, through instinct. Each day brought something new, the taste of a wild berry, the sound of a bird, the feel of the sun on their skin. They lived close to the earth, their senses wide open to the world around them. The tribe cherished them, knowing they were both the present and the promise of tomorrow. Adolescence came quickly, marked not by ceremony, but by necessity. A young boy or girl who could gather food, track animals, or tend a fire was no longer a child. They began to take on the weight of survival, joining the adults in their daily work. This was the summer of life, the season of strength, exploration, and growth. Bonds were formed, skills sharpened, and courage tested. Some fell in love, choosing partners with whom they would share the long winters ahead. These relationships were not defined by ritual, but by trust, a connection born of shared effort and survival. Adulthood was the long autumn, the heart of the human experience. It was a time of purpose and responsibility. The hunters went farther, the gatherers worked longer, and the mothers and fathers became teachers to those younger than them. The tribe relied on their wisdom and strength. They carried the fire from generation to generation, ensuring it never went out. Every scar on their hands, every line on their faces, told the story of endurance and knowledge earned through years of challenge. In their quiet moments, sitting by the fire, they reflected on all they had seen, the hunts, the storms, the births, the losses. Their lives were full, even if they never knew it in words. Then came the winter of life, the elder years. Few reached this stage, for the world was harsh and merciless. But those who did were revered. They were the memory keepers, the storytellers. They had seen the world change and survived its lessons. When they spoke, the tribe listened, even if their stories were told in simple gestures or soft sounds. Around them, younger members found comfort, as though the wisdom of the past flowed directly through their presence. Though their bodies weakened, their spirits grew strong. They were living bridges between the living and the ancestors. Death, too, was part of the cycle, not feared, but understood. The caveman knew that everything that lived would one day return to the earth. They saw it in the animals they hunted, in the trees that fell, in the changing of the seasons. When one of their own passed, the tribe mourned, but also accepted. The body was laid gently on the ground, surrounded by stones, flowers, or the tools they had used in life. Sometimes fire was used, a final return to the element that had given warmth and light. They believed, in their own quiet way, that something continued beyond, that the spirit joined the wind, the river, the stars. Each season of life was connected to the next, just as spring follows winter and dusk follows day. There was no fear of growing old, for aging was proof of survival, a badge of honor earned through endurance. Every wrinkle, every scar, every memory was a piece of the human story, carried forward not in words, but in the habits, knowledge, and love passed down through generations. The rhythm of life was simple but profound. The young learned from the old, and the old found meaning in teaching the young. When a child took their first steps, it echoed the steps of ancestors long gone. When someone died, their memory lived on in the skills and traditions they left behind. Humanity had begun to sense something eternal, a thread that connected all who had ever lived and all who ever would. To live as a caveman was to be part of nature as great wheel, to rise with the sun, to sleep beneath the stars, to give and take from the earth in equal measure. Life was not measured in years, but in moments, in the warmth of the fire, the closeness of the tribe, the laughter of children, and the quiet peace that came when the day was done. In that timeless rhythm, they found something that even we, with all our modern knowledge, still seek: the grace of belonging to the world and the wisdom to live in harmony with it. In the vast wilderness of the prehistoric world, much of life existed beyond the reach of human understanding. The caveman's world was enormous, stretching farther than they could ever travel, filled with mysteries that stirred both fear and wonder. Every horizon held the promise of something new and something unknown. To encounter the unfamiliar was both a danger and a revelation, shaping how early humans saw the world and their place within it. Sometimes the unknown took the form of nature itself. Strange sounds in the forest at night, the cry of an unseen animal, the rustling of branches, could freeze the tribe in silence. The dark was alive with mystery, and every noise carried weight. A sudden eclipse might terrify them, as the sun vanished behind shadow. A shooting star might fill them with awe, a streak of fire tearing across the heavens. To the caveman, these events were not accidents of nature, but signs, messages from the sky, from the spirits, from forces beyond their understanding. There were other, more tangible encounters, too, with creatures they had never seen before. As tribes wandered and migrated, they crossed into new lands filled with strange beasts, towering mammoths with curving tusks, woolly rhinoceroses, saber-toothed cats. Some were predators, others prey, all of them part of the same fragile balance. Each meeting with a new animal required learning how to track it, how to avoid it, how to respect it. The unknown could kill, but it could also feed, clothe, and teach. Yet perhaps the most profound encounters came when humans met others like themselves, but not quite. Across the ages, tribes encountered different human groups: Neanderthals, Denisovans, and early Homo sapiens, each with their own customs, languages, and tools. To meet another tribe was to confront a reflection, familiar yet foreign. Were they friends or foes? Some encounters ended in violence, battles fought with stone and fire over territory and survival. Others led to cooperation, the sharing of fire, tools, or food. In those rare peaceful moments, early humans may have realized something extraordinary, that they were not alone, and that others, too, carried the spark of thought and feeling. These meetings shaped humanity's destiny. When groups merged, they exchanged knowledge, how to make better tools, how to track animals more efficiently, how to survive in harsher climates. They exchanged genes, too, weaving their bloodlines together into the tapestry of modern humanity. The unknown, once feared, became part of them. It was through such encounters that humans learned to adapt, to evolve, and to see beyond their small circles of firelight. But not all mysteries could be explained. The cavemen often sensed presences in the world they could not see: the spirits of the dead, the echoes of animals, the shadows in the fog. They felt eyes watching from the forest, voices in the wind. Some of this was imagination, born from isolation and fear, but some of it was the earliest form of spirituality, the sense that existence was larger than what could be touched. The unknown became sacred, a realm of wonder that inspired both caution and reverence. Storms, lightning, earthquakes, all were seen as the breath of unseen powers. To survive such forces was to be reminded of humanity's smallness. And yet, despite their fear, the cavemen faced these mysteries with curiosity. They learned to predict the weather by the smell of the air, to sense the coming of animals by their tracks, to read the moon and stars for guidance. Slowly, the unknown became known, not through magic, but through observation, patience, and courage. And still, there were things that remained unknowable: the vastness of the sky, the endlessness of the sea, the reason for death and dreams. These questions lingered in their minds as they sat beside the fire at night, staring into the glowing embers. They may not have had the words to ask them, but the questions were there, ancient and human. Asterisk, who are we? Where did we come from? What waits beyond the darkness? Asterisk, the unknown was both a teacher and a test. It forced humanity to grow, to imagine, to explore. It stirred the first sparks of curiosity, the same impulse that would one day lead humans to map the stars, sail the oceans, and study the atom. Every time a caveman stepped beyond the safety of the cave, every time they dared to face the dark forest, they carried forward the courage that defines our species. So when the night grew deep and the fire burned low, they would huddle close, listening to the sounds beyond the flames. Somewhere in the distance, the wind whispered through the trees. They did not understand it, but they listened. And in that listening, they took their first steps toward knowledge, toward faith, and toward the endless quest to understand the great unknown. As thousands of years passed, the world began to shift once more, not just in its climate or creatures, but in the hearts and minds of humankind. The age of pure survival was nearing its end, and something new was beginning to stir: the dawn of civilization. The cavemen, who had once lived only by instinct and the rhythm of nature, were slowly learning to shape the world rather than merely endure it. It was the first faint light of a new era, a transformation that would change humanity forever. The seeds of that change were quiet and gradual. It began with a single thought, that perhaps, instead of moving endlessly, people could stay in one place. The herds no longer needed to be followed if food could be grown. Around rivers and fertile valleys, early humans noticed that seeds left behind sometimes sprouted into new plants. The idea took root, literally, and so began the first attempts at cultivation. What had once been gathered from the wild could now be grown by human hands. It was a small act of control, but it marked the beginning of the end for the wandering life. With food came stability, and with stability came new ways of living. Shelters became more permanent. Caves gave way to huts built from wood, stone, and mud. Fires that had once been carried from place to place now burned year-round in the same hearths. Tribes began to stay near the rivers and plains, where food was plentiful and the seasons predictable. Over generations, the nomads became settlers. This change did not happen everywhere or all at once. Many tribes still followed the old ways, hunting and moving with the seasons, while others experimented with staying. But even among those who wandered, life was evolving. Tools became more refined, sharper, lighter, more specialized. Spears turned into arrows. Stones were shaped into axes and sickles. Art flourished too. Carvings, beads, and ornaments appeared, not just for function, but for beauty. The human mind was awakening to something beyond necessity, the desire to create. With that creation came language. What began as gestures and grunts grew into words, shared meanings, and stories passed from mouth to mouth. Around the fire, people no longer just mimed the day's hunt. They spoke of it. They shared knowledge, planned for the future, and dreamed of things beyond the horizon. Communication bound them together more tightly than ever, allowing ideas to spread and grow. Thought itself became the new tool, sharper than any blade, more enduring than any stone. The changing world brought new challenges too. As populations grew, so did the need for cooperation, and sometimes competition. Tribes met more often, not just to trade, but to defend their territory. Tools became weapons, and conflict became part of life. Yet from conflict came unity, and from unity came the first traces of order. Leaders emerged, not rulers as we think of them now, but guides, elders whose wisdom and strength earned them trust. Slowly, society began to take shape. The spiritual life of humanity deepened as well. No longer merely fearing or respecting nature, early humans began to imagine gods and forces that governed the world. They built small shrines of stone, buried their dead with care, and painted walls not just with animals, but with symbols, suns, moons, and shapes that spoke of unseen worlds. Belief evolved into meaning, and meaning into purpose. Humanity was no longer content simply to survive. It began to seek understanding. The dawn of change was not without loss. The old ways, the wandering, the closeness to the wild, the pure rhythm of the earth began to fade. The tribes that once knew every sound and scent of the forest now started to tame it. The balance between nature and humanity began to tilt. And yet, without that change, civilization would never have been born. The price of progress was separation from the simplicity that had sustained them for so long. Still, the spirit of the caveman lived on. Their strength, their adaptability, their creativity, all became the foundation for what came next. The first villages would grow from their shelters. The first tools of metal would evolve from their stone blades. The first stories, written in symbols on clay and stone, would echo the gestures and sounds shared by firelight in distant caves. As the sun rose over a new world, the age of the caveman quietly ended. But it did not vanish. It transformed. The humans who once hunted mammoths and painted the walls of caves had kindled something immortal. the power to imagine, to build, and to dream. The dawn of change was not the end of their story, but the beginning of ours. From their footprints came paths, from their fires came homes, and from their simple survival came the boundless legacy of humankind. A species forever looking to the horizon, still chasing the unknown, but now with purpose, memory, and hope. The fire burns low now. Its light flickers against the cave walls, glowing softly over the marks left by hands long gone. Outside, the wind whispers through the grass, and the stars shine above, the same stars those early humans once watched in silence, wondering at their endless light. Their world has vanished, but their story has not. It lives on in us, in the rhythm of our breath, in the warmth we still gather around, in the sparks of curiosity and courage that define what it means to be human. We began in the darkness, with nothing but our hands, our instincts, and the will to survive. Yet even then, we dreamed. We made fire from stone. We shaped tools, shared food, raised children, and cared for one another. We painted our memories on stone so they would not be lost to time. We built the first families, the first tribes, the first whispers of belief. From those small beginnings, from every scraped hand, every heartbeat, every fire kept alive through the night, civilization was born. When we look back at the caveman, it is easy to see only the hardship, the hunger, the danger, the cold. But within that struggle, there was beauty, a raw and simple kind of grace. They lived close to the earth, bound to its cycles, aware of every breath of wind, every shift of season. They understood balance in a way we have almost forgotten. For them, survival was not just existence. It was connection, unity, and respect for life in all its forms. And though we no longer live in caves or chase mammoths across frozen plains, the echoes of their world still linger within us. We still gather around fires, though now they are made of light, screens, and stories. We still long for connection, for meaning, for warmth against the cold. We still look to the stars and ask the same questions. Asterisk, who are we? Why are we here? Where do we go next? Asterisk, the same questions our ancestors whispered beside the fire so long ago. Their legacy is not written in books or carved on monuments, but in the quiet persistence of the human spirit, the ability to adapt, to care, to dream, and to hope. We are their children, carrying their story forward through every invention, every discovery, every act of kindness. The fire they kindled still burns in us. If you've listened this far, thank you for joining this journey through time, through the darkness, the cold, and the quiet beginnings of our story. If this calm voyage through the past helped you drift toward rest, or simply gave you something to dream about, I'm glad you found your way here. Before you close your eyes, take a moment to subscribe to Asterisk History for Sleep Asterisk, where every story is told softly to help you relax and wander through the forgotten corners of time. And if you'd like, leave a comment below. Tell us what moment in history you'd like to visit next. And when you listen, as you fall asleep, on a quiet afternoon, or in the still hours of the night. For now, let the fire fade. Let the echoes of ancient footsteps soften in your mind. The night is calm, and you are safe, carried by the same timeless rhythm that once lulled our ancestors to sleep beneath the stars. Rest well, traveler of history. Until our next story.